Welcome to Micro Journeys. I'm Daniel Marrujo, and today we're doing something a little bit different. This episode is a collection of some of the moments that stayed with me long after we hit stop on the recording. Insights that shifted my thinking, stories that challenged me, conversations that reminded me how powerful a small step, a micro journey can be. Whether you've been listening from the beginning or this is your first time joining us, these clips capture the heart of what Micro Journeys is all about. Real people, real pivots, and the unexpected paths that shape who we are. Now let's revisit a few of these moments together. It's a pleasure to be out here in North Carolina, and thankful for you to take the time to sit down and chat a little bit.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we kind of go into all of your background here, why don't you just kind of give a little snapshot of yourself, where you're working right now, and then we can kind of cover how we got to, this stage of your life.
Yeah. I'm Dan Janies. I'm a professor of bioinformatics and genomics, and I work at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I run a research center called the Center for Computational Intelligence to Predict Environmental and Health Risks. Has an acronym CIPHER, and we hope you use that.
It's outstanding. It's, when I was reading some of your publications prior to coming out here, it's got a lot of items that I'd say the world was impacted on, and you've been knee deep in not only addressing, but helping to, minimize risks as time goes on. But, starting from the beginning, you're a Michigan native, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Did you start out your education in a area that was focused in what you're doing today? Or give me a little background on like your undergrad and your graduate school.
Yeah, my origins in science were, I was interested in animals, but then there's been a lot of journey from that point, yeah. But animals remain important for diseases. That's where zoonotic diseases come from, is animals.
What's a zoonotic?
Zoonotic disease are diseases that are born in animals to begin with. For example, influenza comes from wild birds. Coronaviruses come from all kinds of birds and mammals, but by and large, the dangerous coronaviruses come from bats. And the zoonosis is the term from when a animal-born pathogen enters humans.
Oh, interesting. So there was initial news articles about coronavirus coming from bats, and it seemed to have quite a bit of media spin as it relates to origins and the such.
We've been publishing on coronaviruses since 2003. I even testified to the Senate about the dangers of coronavirus in 2007. And the three most important coronaviruses, SARS, the original SARS, MERS, and SARS-CoV-2, all have their fundamental origins in bats, okay? There may be intermediate steps. MERS, for example, got involved in infection of camels and their humans, their herders as well. And there may be amplification events in wet markets and so forth that bring animals that are infected closer to people. But if you look at the evolutionary history, bats are the original reservoir of these viruses.
Is there something specific about the bats that allows them to be kind of the original hosts here, or?
Yeah, and it's not just coronaviruses. It's all kinds of viruses. Ebola, Nipah, all kinds of rabies, for example. In the United States, we test bats for rabies. And we think they're just wonderful hosts because the virus needs them to move around. They're mammals, so it opens up a lot of doors. Influenza is successful with birds, though. And we're just now learning that why don't all these viruses just kill the bats, okay? And the bats seem to have a reduced immune system, so they don't take on an infection that many people who die from infection, they die from the immune overreaction of an infection, and the bats don't do that, and they run kind of hot too. So they seem to avoid the burden of the infection, but they benefit the virus by spreading it around.
Interesting. Do you see mutations of the viruses as they get into these bats, or is it something that, as the host, they pretty much carry just one strand of it?
Well, viruses are mutating all the time. I haven't compared, bat versus human mutation rates, but basically, to answer your question my way, SARS-CoV-2 came from bats, maybe through the markets, and got into humans and didn't evolve for a long time because it was doing fine without changing. We were all naive immunologically naive to it. It was just about 2021 we started to see mutations, and then we had all the variants. If the virus is doing fine, there will be natural variation, but there's no natural selection to select different variants if it's doing fine, So,
Okay.
yeah.
And is it something that different types of bats will be more susceptible to different types of viruses, or is it more of just the bat population is susceptible as a whole?
Many species of bats and many, many species or lineages of coronaviruses. Before SARS-CoV-2 emerged, there were, maybe I would have to go back to my my analyses, but I would say 20 species of bats and 20 lineages of coronavirus just clinking all over Asia.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then it goes and starts impacting other species, the humans being, the one that obviously made all the news.
Yeah. We're not systematically sampling nature. I mean, there's a few papers here and there. And I'll get to a point there. But when it gets into us, then we're sampling much more intensely. And we can see every little mutation, So what's really interesting to me is there is a paper. I wish we had the sequence data, but there's a paper from 2018, a year before, some of the origin events of the pandemic SARS-CoV-2, in which rural residents of China have antibodies to bat-hosted coronaviruses. We don't have the sequence from those viral isolates, but there were certainly people infected by bats. Oh, I don't know how they got infected. Maybe the bats live in their houses. Maybe they use them as food. Maybe they're interacting with the guano.
Okay, so these precursors didn't allow for the major spike of the spread, but there's some kind of data that supports that some people had this or some remnants.
It's in the public literature. It wasn't important enough to connect all those dots to the events of Wuhan of 2019, 2020.
Interesting. We're kind of taking a deviation here, which I want to stay on because the Wuhan lab was a big highlighted item for the coronavirus, right?
Yeah. My attitude about that is, as a scientist, I don't have the information. There's nothing in the public domain that allows me to evaluate whether or not it was lab created versus a natural emergence. I do have a lot of data supporting natural emergence. It happened with SARS-1, MERS. Happens all the time in nature. So given the data, I could likely give you an answer, but I don't know if that data exists, or it's certainly not in the public domain about laboratory origins. There were laboratory mistakes in SARS, though. In 2002, 2003, there were laboratory errors. There were leaks. Yeah.
When you say an error, I mean, is this something where maybe someone wasn't gowned up or something like that?
Yeah, a worker being infected. There were several. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't really help with minimizing the spread, right? I mean, with as many of these interactions, like you said, whether it be wet markets, whether it be the droppings, whether it be, the consumption or something to that effect, in concert with laboratory exposure, this doesn't necessarily, help out the spread factor of these types of things. So it almost sounds like it's a catalyst for the growth of, viruses to spread in this space, right?
Yeah. What you need is a virus that can infect people, and we can get into this in influenza too. It can infect people, but also can go person to person, because not many of us are going to be interacting with animals. Yeah. So that's the key step, and it happens in dense cities, happens in wet markets, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting because that interaction. I mean, from a person like myself on a day-to-day life, my interaction with animals is, going out and buying eggs or buying poultry or something like that, which we're going to talk about.
People interact with their pets quite a lot.
Yeah.
They're small mammals, dogs and cats. And
how has that, interaction been impacted? I mean, most common dogs, cats, etc.
Yeah.
Are they as susceptible as bats, or is it something that...
Cats got SARS. And we don't have much evidence that it was cat to human transmission, but there's a very good story about farmed minks in the Netherlands. They were infected from a human, from their handlers. SARS-CoV-2 evolved within the minks, came out again as a new lineage. So this sort of answers one of your original questions, yeah.
Interesting.
So there's a mink origin lineage of SARS-CoV-2. But it's not fundamental in SARS. The minks were on a farm, minding their own business, waiting to become a fur coat, and they got infected from the workers. We have the advantage there of having data from before the event, having data from the event, and data from after the event. And we don't have those advantages for the origins of SARS-CoV-2, for example. We don't have that continuity of information.
Thanks so much for joining us
Absolutely.
here on Microjourneys. Great seeing you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you as well.
It's been a long time, and right on the heels of a pretty awesome announcement. So, hey, first off, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what just happened?
Yeah, so SkyWater has closed the acquisition of Infineon's Fab 25 in Austin, Texas. This brings new foundry capacity, 200 millimeter foundry capacity to the domestic semiconductor market. We think the timing, not only of having this new capacity, but the types of capabilities that we're going to now be able to offer domestically, not only is synergistic with what we're already doing at SkyWater, but plays well into the Made in America, the whole desire to just be able to have more domestic sourcing for foundational semiconductors.
Why don't you give a little description for those that are not familiar with what SkyWater is, kind of the technology focus area, and just kind of the general, overview of the company?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate the opportunity. SkyWater was created in 2017, back when the idea of doing a semiconductor foundry in the U.S. was kind of seen as a wild idea.
Yeah.
A lot of people were, focused on doing semiconductor, foundries outside the U.S., in fact. And one of the things that I had noticed was this lack of innovation on 200 millimeter. A lot of the industry had moved to 300 millimeter, and it had become very transactional. The smartphone was really taking off, and a lot of the innovation was actually happening on the design side or at the extreme nodes. Of course, that was TSMC, and those efforts continue. But innovation around the rest of the platforms was really lacking. And so the idea of SkyWater was really to create what we call a technology foundry. So a foundry that didn't just make volume products, but also had the ability to innovate with our customers and create what we call a virtual IDM-like experience, where even if you didn't own the fab, you had the ability, while you were creating your product, to co-optimize the process at SkyWater, so you get a more customized solution, allowing the process to be optimized as you were creating the product, and do that in a very synergistic way.
And I think it's important to understand when you say IDM versus what you guys are, which is pure play, that means that you can take in designs from anyone. It's not a
Exactly.
vertically integrated kind of company like an IDM would be. So
Yeah,
major difference, right?
Yeah, and that was, that's part of the challenge too. So Cypress, who owned the fab, ran it as an IDM, so it was a captive manufacturing facility, had a small foundry operation that today we call ATS, so that was one of the things that made the acquisition attractive. But what really had happened was the industry, had moved to the point where doing innovation was happening primarily in labs, and then you had to go find some volume manufacturing partner, and that just reduced the time window that you had, because now you had to move it to another fab, you had to requalify, and it just took way too much time. So the idea of us was taking a fab that knew how to run volume manufacturing and build in a R&D capability so that now you were developing in a high volume manufacturing environment. And what that allowed us to do is not only bring a very rich tool set, because the fab in Minnesota was already doing 90 nanometer, which for 200 millimeter was, advanced, certainly advanced. 65 was kind of the limit for 200 millimeter, and then the industry shifted to 300. So we had an advanced 200 millimeter fab that was running volume production, but also had a capability, a foundational capability to do R&D. And so that allowed us to tap into certainly the DoD market. There was a lot of pent-up demand. If you recall, Global Foundries had just acquired IBM's microelectronics business. IBM had been a primary supplier to the defense industrial base, and so we came into the scene about the time that dynamic, of course. Global Foundries, owned by, at the time, was not a public company, was owned 100% by the government of Abu Dhabi. And so having a pure play, but also 100% U.S. investor-owned capability allowed us to capture the attention of the DoD, and that brought in some programs that really kind of got SkyWater on the map and allowed us to demonstrate this ability to do development in high-volume manufacturing environment.
Yeah, and it's an interesting band in which you guys kind of sit, right? You have those foundries that get a lot of public attention, let's call it, because of their node scaling and things of that nature. I like to refer to those as people that are easily seduced by technology or technology seduction, right? They want the latest and greatest. Kind of like
exactly right.
when someone goes and hears that there's a new iPhone, right? You don't know why you're buying it, but it's new. So there's a line all the way around the building. But you break open that iPhone, and what are you using? State of the practice stuff, that secondary band,
Absolutely.
right?
The foundational semiconductors, as we call them.
100%. And with that foundational piece, it's also been reflected by the Department of Commerce when they came out with the results of their RFI study, one of the precursors to chips. It really highlighted that domestically, the biggest concern we have, state of the practice.
Yeah, it's the stuff that we all take for granted, right? It's like when you start your car, you expect all of it to work, but most of that technology is an extreme node. It's stuff that is made in 200 millimeter fabs on 130 nanometer, 90 nanometer technologies, and it's the stuff that not only drives the safety in an automotive, application, but also creates all the visual experiences, all the kind of multimedia entertainment value that we now expect from our cars, as well as getting us from point A to point B. A lot of it is also going into EV and hybrid vehicles in terms of controlling how you consume energy and how energy gets converted, from one form to another to extend the life and the usability of a car. So all these things really require foundational silicon. That's why both us and the U.S. government has started referring to it as foundational, because it really is that essential ingredient that makes the extreme node, the AI chips, all that doesn't work if you don't have the foundational semiconductors. And we think that's one of the things where SkyWater offers a unique solution set. We're not only innovating at 200 millimeter, but we're bringing that capacity, that scale to the U.S. as a committed supplier to the U.S. domestic market. And so Fab 25 is a good example of that. Us doing advanced packaging in Florida, bringing technology that currently is only available in Asia to the U.S. market, is all about creating this foundational capability so that for those companies that want to have domestic sourcing, we can provide kind of, again, an end-to-end capability, of virtual IDM-like capability, not just front-end wafer fabrication, but all the way through assembly test.
So outside of just being a state of the practice or foundational, a fabrication capability, there's a lot of, I would call it boutique aspects that you bring to the table as well. It appears as though it's like a technologist haven, right? Where you can say, look, I can mix this MEMS device, like you said, with this CMOS device, and now I can have an application that is specific to my industry, opposed to going to 2, 3, 4 sites to try and, kind of do this hodgepodge. It's all under one umbrella. Do I have it kind of right?
Yeah, we actually call it the innovator's edge for that reason, because what typically happens is we have some core capabilities, but a application that someone's looking to get to market, they can come in and not feel constrained by the fact that we only do CMOS or we only do MEMS, and now they have to figure out how to integrate it all together. Having advanced packaging even adds more capability there, because in many ways, most of the applications we do have some form of advanced packaging. You're taking a MEMS device, a CMOS device, an RF device, and putting them into a package.
And this is where the Florida site plays in, right?
That's exactly right. So that's where we refer to as a virtual IDM. So now in a vertically integrated IDM, everything's captive, and the only company that's getting value from it is the one who owns the assets. And the foundry model and the SkyWater approach, and that's why we call it technology as a service, you can either use one little component of what we offer, or you can put together an entire flow where you do the microbolometer, the readout IC, and the wafer level vacuum packaging, all within a turnkey operation at SkyWater. And that just creates not only more stickiness with us in terms of the wallet share we can go after with our customers, but also it reduces the time to value and reduces problem solving. When there's an issue, you're not dealing with 3 suppliers now, you're dealing with 1 supplier. And, it gets their designs to market faster and allows us to get faster yields, or faster cycle times and better yields for them.
Yeah, what I've noticed is outside of the very recent announcement over in Texas, you've been able to get quite a bit of state support, both in Florida and it's Osceola County, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
Osceola County, exactly.
And then over here in Minnesota for your 2 sites. And I think that relationship, which appears to be extremely strong in both of the states for each of the different locations, has been a huge representation of not only the importance that you guys are bringing from a technology perspective, but the impact you're making in each of these different communities, right?
Oh, for sure. And it's the whole idea of public-private partnerships. And, we started doing this even before chips became, a thing. When we got engaged with Osceola County, they had built a facility that kind of had a false start. We came in, became the operator, and now in partnership with Osceola County, we've not only executed on some existing programs that they had kicked off before we got involved, but we brought in another program, again, another DoD-funded program to stand up a wafer fan-out level packaging technology that, again, today exists only in Asia. Bring that to the U.S. It's on 300 millimeter, so this is our first move into 300 millimeter. And we're doing it in partnership where they're creating jobs. We have a STEM school co-located on campus.
And this is part of the NeoCity ecosystem, right?
Exactly. And so we actually have students that starting in 10th grade of high school can start interning at SkyWater, getting exposed to microelectronics. You think about workforce development. You've already have experience by the time you're going to college, and then you get injected into the college system. So by the time you graduate, you can literally have 6 years experience, working in semiconductor foundries. SkyWater is one. There's, Purdue has got a great program now where they bring students into their ecosystem, and we're seeing, I think, just this way to get people excited about semiconductors early in their career, so they're committed to making this the path they want to follow. As for us that have been in semiconductors, we're very passionate about it. But for a while, semiconductor manufacturing was not where people were putting, their efforts in terms of developing careers. And that's something we definitely have to turn around. And what we're doing in Florida is a great example of it.
Yeah, I'm not a marketing person, but I'm just thinking, you have these students coming in, you're giving them a pathway, right? And you could easily frame this as the sky, in parentheses, water is the limit, right? So the sky's the limit here for these eager kids that are looking to engage in the such. It's an absolute paradigm shift right now, where a lot of attention was on fabs, especially during the CHIPS initiative. The logical question is okay, after you manufacture it here, where are you going to package it?
Yeah, why do you want to send it back overseas?
Why is it going to Malaysia? Why is it going to Singapore? Why is it going to Taiwan? I mean, it creates that vulnerability. You talked about the security or the SkyWater inside kind of piece. That thought process has to be integrated into this if we're going to be building in America, buying in America, and distributing here in America. And it's gotten attention outside of just the Defense Department, your Florida site, which has been really interesting. In discussions with IMEC, I know that they've now created a pretty awesome partnership with you guys in the whole bridge facility NeoCity ecosystem. So I know that they're very excited about that. So and you're seeing a lot of pivots from others that are, known as foundry capabilities, adding the packaging piece.
Oh, yeah. I think it's really if you think about photonics and quantum, they all leverage advanced packaging to put the solutions together. And what's interesting is there's not just the movement to advanced packaging, but eventually the movement from wafers to panels. I just saw an article today that, basically by 2029, by the turn of the decade, you're going to start seeing the movement to panels. And that will be a big paradigm shift because, we're used to making things that are round. Now you got to make things that are square, and putting, die on panel is going to become kind of the mantra going forward. And that's part of our strategy with our fan out technology is we're starting at 300 millimeter, but we believe there is a path to panel. And much like think of Moore's law was all about shrinking transistors. Well, now we're just shrinking interconnect, capabilities, creating more packing density. And instead of making each chip smaller and smaller, now we're going to be packaging things together in a tighter form factor.
Hey, thanks for joining us here on Micro Journeys. It's a pleasure having you here. We've known each other for a number of years, and it's exciting to actually have the opportunity to sit down and to give the audience an opportunity to hear a little bit about yourself and, take away a lot of the cool stories that you've been able to share with me. So
Awesome. Awesome. And it's great to be here and great to see you. It's been a little while since we had a chance to get together and look forward to chatting here for the next hour or so.
yeah, yeah. So let's kind of kick this off with a little of your background. Where did you grow up? And then ultimately, how did the Air Force come into your life?
Grew up in a little town called Paris, Tennessee. So not to be confused with Paris, France. Obviously, it's about a town of about I don't know 6 or 8 thousand people. Small town, West Tennessee. Um, kind of rural farming town, and played sports. Big into football, big into baseball. Growing up, um, loved everything I did back there. Loved it so much so that I'm going to wind up moving back there here in the not too distant future to kind of get back and settle down a little bit and slow down a little bit. Um, I don't think it was a I don't think I had any different upbringing than any other young kid would that likes sports and likes being outside all the time. And somewhere along the line, I guess I'd say 10th grade or so, we had planes fly over all the time from Fort Campbell. We were about an hour from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So there's planes and helicopters flying over quite a bit on low level, what's called low level routes. So they're about 500 feet off the ground. And it was somewhere in there that I said, I want to go to the Air Force Academy. Um, Not from a military family, but it just kind of suddenly started becoming a little bit of a bug and was had the best high school guidance counselor in the world who had helped a couple of other students get into academies, and she was great. The local congressman was great for that district. And night before I graduated high school, I found out I was going to the Air Force Academy. So it was I would say, a great childhood growing up. I had, mom and dad are awesome. Both still here, so that's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to moving back there to kind of take care of them or look after them. And then, off and running in the Air Force after that.
So you're at the academy now, and you ultimately decide that you want to become a pilot. And I guess the question that I would start out with is, when you became a pilot, they assign call signs, right? How did you get Trashman?
Most of most call signs come about from usually one of three things: something stupid you did flying, something that's related to your name. Like I've got a couple of friends that are last name are Campbell and their call sign is Soup. Um, and then the last one is usually something stupid you did on the ground. And a lot of times alcohol is involved with that, at a
Yeah.
party or something like that. And mine falls into the third category. I had gone through pilot training, which is about a year. Then we go through, back then at least, we went through what was called lead-in fighter training. And that is just learning the basics of, flying a jet at a higher performance level. It was a T-38, which was the second airplane we flew, but we were now doing more things with it than we did in pilot training. Then after that, I went to fly A-10s. So I get to England Air Force Base, Louisiana, and get settled in there. It's right after Desert Storm was over. The A-10s down there had kicked ass, done great. Everybody was kind of, riding a little bit of a high. And so I'll say the competition was pretty fierce among the squadrons on anything that we did, whether it was a game called Crud, which is played on a pool table, or intramural basketball or softball or whatever. So we had a golf tournament, and it was a wing golf tournament. So the squadrons are competing against each other. Except this one has a little bit of a twist. Some of the holes had obstacles around the green. Some of the holes you could only use one club. Some of the holes they had shots of whiskey called Jeremiah Weed on the tee box, and if you did a shot and teed off within 15 seconds, you got a stroke off. Some of the holes had, or you had string for mulligans, and then the last one that got me into getting my call sign was for every 9 cans of beer your team brought back at the end of the round, your team got a stroke off of the total score or their total score. So we get around, I don't know, around nine into the like 9th, 10th hole. And I was taking advantage of the shots before teeing off, and we were having a pretty good time. And I came up with a great idea, at least at the time I thought it was. And so I told my cart buddy, I said, Buster, I said, hey, why don't you jump in with the other 2 guys? I've got an idea. He's like, all right. And so he jumps in with the other 2 guys we were playing with. And I proceed to drive around the course, heckling the other teams or other
The
foursomes.
golfers?
Yeah, the other golfers as they're teeing off, heckling them a little bit. But while I'm doing that, I'm opening the garbage cans and pulling out the empty beer cans, smashing them, throwing them in the golf cart, and then driving off to the next hole. So we get to the end of the round, and needless to say, I'm a mess.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
In many ways, I'm a mess.
Yeah, because you've been drinking, you
Been
have
drinking, I've been
garbage
drinking
all
too,
over. Yeah.
Been talking smack to everybody that's playing. And so we get back there, and I think we were one of the worst gross scores. But with our strokes that we got off for between the shots we drank, and then I came back, and I think it was 180 something beer cans, I think, or some crazy number of beer cans. I don't remember because I was I had been drinking out of a few of them over the course of the day. So we wound up getting like 20 strokes off just for that. So we went from being towards the bottom, maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th from last, to I believe we finished 2nd place. We didn't win, but we wound up finishing 2nd place.
Yeah, so your strategy wasn't too bad.
So you get your call sign, like I said, and they have naming ceremonies and everything. And different squadrons and different aircraft types do it differently. Different locations do it differently. So in this case, we're at the pro shop in the clubhouse, and one of the guys tells the squadron commanders, like, hey, let's do a naming right now for Hicks. And Wiley's like, okay. So, they get a whiteboard out real quick. And, what you usually do is you write up, or people yell out nomination names for the call sign, and they'll put them up on the whiteboard.
So you'll just have an audience of people to be like, oh, like Cam Soup, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So the guys in the squadron will yell out, some random names, and then they have to have a rationale behind it. And I'd been there I think I've been there for a couple months. So I'd been there long enough to do some flying and do some, and be out with the guys and this and that. So enough time to have a few call signs. But the guy that asked the squadron commander to do the naming, had one in mind, which was Trashman. And so when we did it, he called it out, and he called the reason why, and everybody's like, yep, that's it.
Oh, man.
Everybody cheered. And from that point forward, it was Trashman.
You had mentioned that you had a variety of different platforms, and I believe the one that you flew the most was the A-10, correct?
It was.
So why don't you describe the A-10 a little bit?
When I first started flying it, I would describe it as an aircraft or a jet that's easy to learn how to fly, but it's hard to really fly it well, which means employ the weapons on it and make it do what you want it to do in a combat scenario, because you've got 3 radios that are, coming through your helmet. You've got a number of different weapons available to you. You've got a huge gun, obviously, right underneath the cockpit, in the nose, the 30 millimeter. So the airplane itself, I didn't think was too hard to fly, but to employ it was where it became much more of a challenge and much more difficult. The crazy thing is, you know, when I first started flying in 1990, 91, I guess, it had, I don't know, I'm trying to, we had almost no real technology in it. No, there's no such thing as GPS. We dropped all the bombs. We're manually uh,
Interesting.
adjusted for dropping the bombs. Same thing for shooting the gun. None of that was computerized at the time, but it was just happening. The first version of a thing called Lasty was coming out, and that allowed us to now start getting a computerized bomb sight when we're diving, doing dive bomb deliveries, a computerized strafe sight, gun sight for the jet. So that was the beginning of what became a lot of technology to go in that airplane over the last 30 years, and they're still adding technology to it now.
So rewind a little bit here. I mean, how would you get the coordinates for something, right? I mean, I'm thinking of this almost kind of like having a blindfold and throwing darts,
A little
and
bit.
you're hoping for the best, but I mean, it's there's not a lot to gauge. How are you doing this without GPS and all these other?
It was extremely difficult. When I was down in Louisiana, my first base, like I told you, was England Air Force Base, which has since closed in Alexandria. So everything's flat down there, and so we do low levels down at 100 feet or 300 feet, and you do a lot of navigation by reading the water tower names to know what town you're going by, and
Interesting.
then looking at your map that you had in the cockpit with you, because we didn't have a moving map, we didn't have GPS at the time. We had what's called an inertial navigation system, but that system would drift as much as a half mile or more an hour every now and then, depending on which airplane you had. And so you had to constantly update it by going over a known point, and then updating the system, and then it would immediately start drifting again. But
So it
uh,
sounds like you had to do quite a bit of prep work. Know
we
the
did.
environment that you were going to be in, know what the mission objective was, and really hone in on. Okay, it's kind of like when you visit a new town prior to all the GPS navigation. You look for landmarks,
Yeah.
right? Hey,
Yeah.
where's the red fire hydrant? Okay, I turn here, kind of thing. But from a pilot perspective, am I getting this right?
That's exactly right. When we did close air support, and we'd have controllers on the ground or forward air controllers in the air, the big thing was, once you got that what's called a 9 line, which that was our attack brief, so that was the target coordinates, the initial point where they want you to start from to run in to hit the target, the heading and the distance from where the initial point is to the target, all the details, what kind of effects. So then you would figure out what kind of weapon you wanted, what type of attack formation you wanted to run. And now, because there's only one person in A10, so if you had a two ship or a four ship, then you had to relay it to the whole team on the radio at why you built the game plan, the attack plan in your mind. And it was a challenge, because you would depart the IP, and if you were doing low altitude attack where you obviously can't see as much at 100 feet or 300 feet, we do something called a pop-up attack. So you get a couple of miles from the target, and you turn the plane away from the target, and you pop so you can look out your left or right side and see where the target area is. Well, as you talk the brief, you look and see if there's any streams or rivers or fields or houses or buildings that are going to kind of tip you off to know where to look. So, we called them funneling features to kind of help keep us, funnel us towards the target.
Because you're off the beaten path now,
Yep.
right? Like, I mean, you're
Yeah.
flying, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I got to see what the surrounding area
Yeah.
is. You pop up like
Pop.
this,
Yep.
but then you got to get back.
Yeah. Then you got to roll. So, usually you would, if you're running this way, turn 30 degrees maybe or so, pop up, look, 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 try to find the target. And then you roll a lot of times, over, and pull back down towards the horizon to get lined up on the target.
Wow.
So, it was fun. It was, once you got comfortable doing it, it was a lot of fun.
Are there any particular missions that jump out to you that you say, you know what, this one was an interesting one?
There, got about, I don't know, 600 hours or so of combat time in the A-10, over in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And I think the one that probably of all of them, there's a few that stand out, but the one that stands out the most, we had a mission one day where we were supporting a special ops, Marine special ops detachment, and they were in one compound in this river valley, and there was another group of Marines in another compound about a half mile away, and they'd been getting, and our job was just to do overwatch, and it'd been fairly quiet. We go back and forth to the tanker. Usually, we would stay over top for about 4 hours, and then the next set of A-10s would come in. Next two ship would come in, and then they would sit over top just to make sure things
So
are.
Overwatch is it like a scout to just make sure that you could just see the area? Overwatch is in kind of seeing where movements were, a combination of all?
A little bit of everything.
Okay.
We had maps with the compounds, and the compounds are like a mud hut with maybe a 6-foot wall all around it, or a 10-foot wall all around it, because that's how all of the little villages were. And the village was empty. It was all, just about anybody that was in that village, or any of those villages in that area, were going to be Taliban. And so what the Marines had done is they were working with Afghan commandos that they had trained, so Afghan special forces. And so what would happen is the sun would come up, they'd run up a U.S. flag out of the compound, and then the Afghan commandos would start talking smack on loudspeakers to the Taliban to try to coax them out into a fight. And so we've got our targeting pods, and we're looking in different areas and different building numbers that the ground guys are wanting us to take a look into. And it's mostly quiet. There's a little bit of chatter on the radios with the Taliban, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but nothing was really going on. And about 10 minutes before we were due to leave, the next two ship was coming in. I was kind of briefing them up on what was going on. All hell breaks loose just outside of both of those compounds. They start taking fire from all sides, and so it turns into a big fight really, really fast. And so I was like, all right, I've got enough gas, or we've got enough gas to stay here another 20, 25 minutes. And the other guys were just getting on board. So we did what's called coordinated twos. So brought them in and kind of made us a four ship.
Okay.
And
So you guys were flying with two already.
Mhm.
Then the other two just join you.
Exactly.
And now you've had all four of you guys
Yep.
now addressing the situation that's happening down
right.
below. Okay.
And so, we start working with the JTAC, which is the Joint Terminal Air Controller on the ground. So I'll say he's the ground commander's mouthpiece for the Air Force or for any air assets. So the ground commander's telling him what he wants hit. The JTAC is working up the 9 lines and the target information, and he's passing it up to the air. Unless they want specific weapons, it's up to us to figure that out. In that case, it was a lot of rockets and guns, because we were strafing and shooting very close to the friendly positions and kind of yelling at them to get down behind the compounds while we were trying to shoot the fighters that were outside the compounds, ambushing them. And I would say in a matter of 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we out of all the airplanes, we spent every bullet, bomb, and rocket. And the best thing was we got to see the commandos at the base at Kandahar a couple days later when they came out of the field, and we're getting a little R&R. And they happened to come in the squadron one day when I was getting going in to fly, and so we got patches from the Afghan commandos, and the guys were talking to them like, "Man, that was the most awesome thing ever. You guys were screaming, yelling at us to get down." They were literally outside the compound throwing grenades over the compound walls.
Almost like a guardian angel for these guys. I mean,
And
without your support, I mean, they're stranded just having
Yeah.
basically a fist fight down below, right? And so here you are, with the four planes
Yep.
on top, starting the mission, fully loaded with all your missiles and all the rounds and the such, and then you leave and nothing's left basically from an arms perspective,
Yeah.
and the problem's neutralized.
Yeah, and the problem solved. And it's one of those things. I think I don't. It's really hard to describe the feeling of exhilaration flying home, because you've just you've just taken care of the guys on the ground, and you're wondering, making sure, hoping that nobody got hurt or anything down there, because you don't have time to talk about that. It's uh, too much of a madhouse trying to get targeting information, figure out what you're going to do with the airplanes, what weapons you're going to use, where you're going to roll in from, to employ the weapons. So you don't have time to talk about, hey, is everybody doing all right down there? Or hey,
Yeah.
what's the score of the ball game? Or anything like
Well,
that. It's so getting to see them a couple of days later and finding out they only, one of the guys had a scratch on his arm from one of the grenades that
oh,
was thrown over. That's like that was the to me, that was the best part of it all, was knowing that they were okay.
so, a lot of the listeners, they come from a variety of different areas for this podcast. Some are heavy technology focused. Some have extensive, government backgrounds and the such. One of the things that some may not be tracking is what is a war game and how is that just generally structured, right? There's different teams and the such, but give, I guess, kind of a generalized example of what that is.
Yeah, you take and there's you can build these any way you want to build them, as far as depending on what you're looking for outcomes, or looking to analyze or assess. But normally you have a blue team, which is the friendly forces, a red team, which is the bad guys, whoever it may be, and a white team, and they're kind of the referees, and they're also the ones that make the scenario and then keep the scenario going throughout the process. And so most war games take a little while, some months to sometimes a year, year and a half to build up to, because the white team has to build a narrative for what is the background story for how these red and blue are about to come to a fight.
So an
What
example of this would be uh, uh, there has been, an economic downturn
Yeah,
in said country,
yeah,
and that has caused major distress from exports that are going out and something like
yeah,
that. They would get
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. And you can come up with we would sit around and brainstorm and come up with 1,000 little injects and inputs to put in to make this country want to do this or this country want to do this. And so then you give the blue forces and the red forces what they're going to have for assets, as far as military assets to fight, what the rules of engagement are for each side. And normally, what you do with the red forces is you have somebody that is an expert. And, again, I'll just use either Russia or China or, Iran, pick a country. You have somebody that studied them, knows their rules of engagement, knows their systems, knows how they think, knows how they fight. You'll put that person in command of those forces, and he's got a bunch of people working for him. And they're trying to figure out moves. And then the blue side is kind of the same thing. It's like a red flag exercise, except it's on steroids. It's not You're not actually flying airplanes most of the time. You're not actually doing this is more tabletop, doing it with computers and inputting moves and inputting what you're doing. So that you build the narrative with the white force, they build the story, they build the background, they provide, what force structure each side's going to look, who the commander is, how big it's going to be. Then they keep giving injects, and then, leads up to the game, and you get to in this case, we had 2 weeks for the game. We had about, with US and allied forces, we had, I think, about 400 people there, in Hawaii at Camp Smith. And then you get rolling, and you're in a giant, in this case, we were in a giant warehouse, more or less, and it's partitioned off. And then this side figures out, based off of what the storyline is and what rules of engagement are, what different restrictions they have put on them from the political side. They, you know, each side puts in their moves for the first shots or whatever. And so they'll do that, and they'll do it in, each move can be a 24-hour time slice, or it can be a 2 days time slice, or something along those lines. And then what happens is they put their moves in, the red puts their moves in, then you have a half day off or so, and the white team assesses each side what they decided to do for their first moves of the conflict. Then they figure out what attrition what was destroyed on either side.
So
And then you go back now to another move or to the next move. So it just depends on how far you want to take it.
So it's kind of like input comes in from both teams. Hey, I shot off. I'm going to just use a simplified version. 20 missiles.
Yeah.
At this asset, and the white team will come in and say, okay, good. You've knocked out these 4 assets with the 20 missiles. But as a result of this was what happened as you were doing this portion.
Yeah. As you were doing this, you were also getting shot, or you lost 2 aircraft, or you shot 20 missiles, but you had 2 airplanes shot down as a result of it. So that's where the white force is critical for them to be competent and understand the systems.
Interesting.
To make sure something's not getting skewed.
Yeah.
Because anything you could bring out of that, it's not going to be 100% truth data, but it's going to give you some trends.